Hello everybody, I'm Storm Ushery, the Conservation Education Manager for the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish. And in today's video, we have a special treat. We have some of our fisheries staff here from Fisheries Division that are going to talk to you all specifically about careers, maybe some recommendations, things that you can try to do to get into this profession. And I'm pretty excited to have them today. A couple of these people I have worked with throughout my career, and specifically Jane, I haven't got to meet you yet, but hopefully down the road we'll get to work on a project together besides this recording. So with that, we're going to go ahead and let Mr. Eric Fry kind of take off with it. So Eric.
Thanks, Storm. I'm Eric Fry. I'm the Sport Fish Program Manager. I've worked for the department for 22 years here, and actually a couple days will be my anniversary. I started as a conservation officer in the Las Cruces, as a Las Cruces district officer. Did that for a couple years, and then I was promoted to the Northeast Area Fisheries Manager, which was in Raton, and served in that position for several years. And then in about 2014, I took the job as a Sport Fish Program Manager. And basically my role is to oversee the Sport Fish Program. The Sport Fish Program manages all the fish that, as we say, the ones that people like to catch. So it's all the recreational species. It's things like the walleye and the bass and the catfish, the non-native trout, brown trout, rainbow trout, kokanee salmon, tiger muskie. It's all those fish that people like to catch. So we manage those, and includes things like conducting fish population surveys. It's monitoring and making stocking recommendations. We do fish kill investigations. We make recommendations for fishing rules like bag limits and seasons and that kind of stuff. We monitor fish habitats, and we improve habitats around the state. So kind of in a nutshell, we manage all the things involved with managing fish that people like to catch.
I am Jane Trujillo. I am a cold water fisheries biologist for the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish. And I work specifically with cold water salmonids on the eastern side of the state. I started off as the San Juan technician, a seasonal technician for 6 months. And then I was the cold water technician for a couple of years. And then I got promoted to cold water biologist almost 2 years ago. I've been with the department for almost 5 years altogether. My current job role, like I said, is working with salmonids, so rainbow trout, brown trout, kokanee, a lot of those cold water species that Eric had mentioned. My job duties are a lot of field work, particularly in the spring, summer, and fall. And then in the winter, there's quite a bit of office work. So I get a good combination of both field work and office work. So that field work is things like stream electrofishing surveys, gill netting for species in reservoirs and things like that. And then I also get to help out with some other projects. I get to help out with the walleye spawn. I also get to help out with native fish projects. So every year we've been doing Rio Grande cutthroat trout restoration projects, and I always get to help out with those. So I get to do a lot of different projects working with fisheries management for the agency, and it's really fun.
I'm Richard Hansen. I'm the cold water fisheries supervisor in the sport fish part of the Fisheries Division of Mexico Department of Game and Fish. I started with the department in 1989 as a student intern, and I've worked on and off with them ever since. I'm entering my 25th official year working with the department. When I started working with the department full-time in 1997, I came on as a angler survey coordinator. So I would measure our harvest and use throughout the state and people's opinions and do what we could to figure out what we needed to do to make fishing better throughout the state. Over the years, I've migrated to various positions. I've worked everything from administration in the division to my current position now. Currently, I work with our biologists to identify projects and implement them, help them analyze their data, put their reports together, interpret what they're seeing and seeing what we can do to improve cold water fishing throughout the state. I also work in various projects such as monitoring our kokanee populations in our cold water lakes and Eagle Nest, Heron and Navajo Lake, make sure that those fisheries are responding well. I help formulate stocking throughout the state, evaluate how well our stocking is doing, introduce cutthroat trout in various waters where people can have contact with them outside of the regular restoration, help work with the tiger muskie throughout the state, where we're using them to help control suckers and goldfish, and help our biologists up on the San Juan and evaluating one of the country's premier cold water trout fisheries.
Cool. Thank you all for your introductions, and we've got a lot of knowledge here. We've got folks that have worked various jobs within fisheries, so we're pretty fortunate to have you all today. I guess one question I would throw out there, if we have someone that is interested in getting into fisheries, is there a particular college degree that would be required for a lot of these positions? And what types of degree should folks be looking at trying to obtain to get into fisheries management?
I'll start. So my recommendation would be a Bachelor of Science in fisheries or fish and wildlife conservation ecology, something like that. That's focused on fisheries if that's your interest, or focused on wildlife if that's your interest. There are other degrees. For instance, mine is, I have a Bachelor of Science in Natural Resources Management, which is more broad, but my recommendation would be to kind of focus in on what you want to do if you can. And then depending on what you want to do, you also might want to get a Master's of Science. I'm currently doing that right now at NMSU while I'm working with Game and Fish. And it's really valuable to have one. And especially nowadays, some states even require that you have a master's degree in order to get a biologist job. So it just kind of depends on the agency that you'd like to work for, but a master's degree definitely helps.
Most of us have wildlife and/or fisheries degrees. I personally have a bachelor's in wildlife and a master's in wildlife management. But because there's a lot of diverse disciplines involved in fisheries, there's no limit to what direction you can take it. Degrees in general biology topics and even sociology can be fitting into fisheries management. Basically, your best bet is to pursue what you have the most interest in, and don't expect to be taking classes that are going to teach you to hunt and fish so much as some of the science behind the biology and everything, and how to deal with, we deal with a lot of numbers. So getting a strong quantitative background is really important in doing your job. Don't necessarily lock yourself into fisheries. Like I say, both of my degrees are in wildlife. My twists and turns in life brought me into fisheries, and I certainly don't feel any deficiency to having wildlife degrees instead of fisheries degrees.
Like Richard and Jane said, our minimum degree requirement for our entry-level biologist is a bachelor's in science degree in wildlife, fisheries, animal sciences, any of the biology disciplines. A lot has changed in over my career with the department. When I first came in, the Bachelor of Science was probably the normal degree that folks had. The field has become a lot more competitive, and I would highly recommend folks getting a master's degree. I think it gives you more competitive for promotional opportunities. It probably diversifies your background and your experiences in education. So that's what I'd recommend folks to do. And like Richard said, keying on the sociology, all our work is founded in biology, the work and research we do, but especially on the recreational side, we're more social scientists than we are really biologists. We interact with the public on a daily basis. Some of the fishing regulations that we propose are founded in biology, but there's a big social pressures on it, whether it comes with ethics or morals and the things that people like, how they like to catch the fish and the manner they catch them. So there's a lot of social pressures on fisheries management since it's a shared public resource. So getting a strong background or even a degree in sociology is not a bad thing, but you will need some kind of science degree to be competitive. So that's what I would definitely recommend to pursue.
Thank you all. I think something else that people or even kids, let's say we've got mid schoolers or high schoolers right now that are interested, and they kind of know what kind of college degree now that they may entertain or look at, that, hey, I want to get into fisheries. This is what I need to do. Are there certain classes, like if it's a mid schooler that's getting into high school, or maybe even some high school students now, classes that may be electives that they should try to focus on that may be advantageous and help them as they transition into their college career?
So getting a good baseline on all the basics of education is key to succeeding in college. English is very important. You're going to have to do a lot of writing no matter where you end up in this profession. Math is very important. Even if you're having trouble with it, I'd encourage you to keep pushing on it. Take your science classes. Some public speaking, if you have that ability, would also come in of benefit to you. Measuring stream water quality, habitat quality, anything you can do just to get a finger in that will give you an idea of what you're going to need as you move forward.
I agree with Richard. I grew up in Raton, New Mexico, and I remember my biology teacher, Mr. Haskell, who was a very stringent, very hard-nosed teacher, but but he was a good teacher, and I got a solid background in basic biology, and then I took an advanced biology, a college prep biology, and it was one of the best classes I ever took. We also had a really active ag program that did wildlife biology and wildlife management. So any of those kind of classes you can take, those college prep classes, like Richard said, in English. I think we have a lot of really good scientists but we don't have a lot of good authors. So it's definitely a different skill. And also any classes that teach you how to communicate, because one of the things in fisheries management, wildlife management, again, all of our stuff is based on biology, but if you can't communicate the decisions we made or the science, what the science is telling us to the public, in a diversity of public, all the way from school kids, all the way up to maybe possibly, administrators or state legislators or, mayors or some of our partners, if you can't communicate that science to them, then we've failed. So any classes that you can take in sociology, communication, English, writing, that kind of stuff will definitely help you.
All right. Well, Eric and Richard really covered that pretty well. So I just add to that, a lot of people are intimidated by math and science classes, and you really shouldn't be, because I am of the belief that if you put your mind towards something and you really want to accomplish something and you work at it, you're going to get there. So don't just get discouraged by, if you feel like you're struggling in chemistry or something like that. Just use that as fuel for the fire, and keep in mind that if it gets hard, it's because you're learning. And so it's a good thing. And yeah, math and science are really important. Communication is really important too.
What you guys just mentioned, just trying to give some direction there. And one thing I would add that I can think of from my college career is I would have several of my peers that maybe there was a particular class that they struggled with, and just knowing that you're there to help each other as students, and don't ever hesitate to reach out and help someone that's struggling, just so they can grasp a concept and you get through it as a team. Because at the end of the day, you're not trying to beat somebody to get a better education so you can beat them out in a job. You're trying to help each other so we all succeed and represent our university and our school and our families as best as we can. So, but another question I would like to bring up that I think would be interesting is, are there any life skills that someone might be able to start learning today that would benefit them with the job? Maybe it's something that they may not learn in high school, courses, or even in college, but are there things that they could look at trying to get better that would be advantageous and help them when they get into fisheries management?
I'll start with that one, Storm. I would say learn how to drive a boat. Um, that's a great question, because one of the things, and maybe I'm going to show my age a little bit, sound like an old timer, but I see it in some of the younger generations, and no reflection of Jane. I don't think Jane's one of those, but we see some of the younger folks coming out that don't really have those, what I call ranch skills. I grew up working on a ranch in northern Mexico, and you just take some of that stuff for granted, whether it's changing a tire, or your boat breaks down or your truck breaks down and you're stuck in the middle of nowhere. You have the ability to fix it, and and to get it back so you can get back home. A lot of times we're out on the lake. If I've worked on a lot of boat motors with a headlamp and a Leatherman in the middle of the night to get myself home. There's no AAA on middle of Ute Lake at midnight. So I think some of those skills, being able to pack wheel bearings, any of that kind of stuff, is stuff that the school won't teach you. In any opportunity you can get to do that, to go drive a boat or backing a trailer, or fixing a fence, wiring even your car stereo. We grew up wiring our own stereos, but the stuff I did there really helps me whenever I need to wire a sonar in a boat. We don't, just second nature. I think some of that stuff is missing, and it obviously the schools weren't going to be able to teach you that. But I think there's opportunities. There's clubs, FFA and 4-H and Boy Scouts of America or Scouts of America. I think there's a lot of clubs and a lot of opportunities for kids that'll help get you in the outdoors, and even just being comfortable in the outdoors. We have a lot of folks that get degrees that come on with our department that have never been camping, and I think some of us that grew up in the outdoors take that for granted. So any of those opportunities you can get will definitely help you hone some of those other skills.
Definitely. What Eric said about being able to fix stuff, or fix a flat, or back a trailer, or drive a boat, all of these things are really important when you get out in the field and you start working. Knowing how to be comfortable when you're camping, those are all things that are, like Eric said, they don't teach you that in school, but it's a huge part of what we do. Boat issues are a regular occurrence in our jobs, and if you don't know what to do, then you're kind of stuck and you got to figure it out. So if you can get any of that stuff now, I would definitely recommend that. Just having those practical skills, because the degree will teach you all the coursework that you need, but it's kind of hard to figure out how to back a trailer until you do it. So it's a big help having that, for sure. So any kind of trainings you can get your hands on are helpful. And I'd recommend getting as many of those as you can, even if it's first aid. Things like that will all help in the long run. And another thing that's really helpful is if you can find some sort of internship or something like that gets you outside and gets you doing things in the field. There's twofold kind of utility to that. And one is that you get to see if it's something that you want to do, because you don't really know. You can look at the job description on paper and say, yeah, that sounds fun, but you don't really know until you get out there and you start doing stuff. So just try to get as much experience as you can doing lots of different things. And maybe that'll help drive your decisions later on specializing in a fish or wildlife field, if that's what you want to do.
Having a variety of skills is very, very valuable in this position. There's a lot of times we're working independently. People aren't always telling us what to do all the time. We have to solve problems all the times ourselves. So if you can develop your time management and your problem solving just on everyday life, it's going to serve you and your future employer to no end. You're going to have to deal with a number of different priorities that come up. You're going to have to figure out on your own, a lot of times, which ones you're going to have to conquer first. So even the littlest things, I would encourage you to figure out how to manage your effort so you're not leaning too hard on everybody else. We're all a team, but you don't want to be the anchor.
Some great insight there. And I appreciate all the comments. I guess one skill that I'm thinking of that I can remember, I took a fisheries management class, and we did get to learn a lot of it was more bookwork type stuff, but one thing that the professor had us doing was just learning something as simple as how to tie a bowline knot. Some people pronounce it bowline, but even a bowline knot, practice your knot tying skills, because you get out on a boat and you've got to tie a flotation device off on a net, or you need to tie an anchor to a net, or whatever you got to do, you're going to have to know that stuff. So if you can learn that now and get very efficient at doing it, it's going to benefit you down the road. So just the little things in life that you may not think of. So I guess the next thing, do you think that it would be important, if somebody's wanting to get into fisheries management, obviously they, maybe they've spent a lot of time in the outdoors and they have been angling or fishing, but if they really never have, do you think it would be important for somebody to get out there and learn how to fish a little bit, maybe learn, the different ways of fishing, fly fishing versus bait and lure, etc. Do you think that that would help them out in this career?
It can be helpful, especially if you're working with sport fish, or if you're working with big game animals or something like that. Then it definitely helps, because I take calls from the public. And so if somebody calls me and asks me, how do I go fish for kokanee in the summer? I need to know how to answer that. And it helps. I grew up fishing. I don't remember learning how to fish. It's just something that I learned to do when I was really young. But it helps being able to talk about it. So like I said, especially for sport fish or anything related to hunting or fishing specifically, it's definitely valuable. And if you didn't grow up hunting or fishing, there's ways to learn later in life. And I actually just started hunting about 4 years ago as an adult. And so it's definitely something that you can learn if you want to. And it will help you in some areas, like within this agency. There's some other positions that maybe don't require it, but you never know when you're going to get a phone call from somebody from the public. And it's extremely helpful, even if it's maybe not your area of expertise. If somebody calls you or sees you in an office and asks you a question about what kind of fishing tackle you should use, it's just nice to be able to have some kind of idea instead of just, not knowing anything about it. So it's definitely helpful.
Having a general knowledge of it is really important. In sport fish, we're dealing with anglers. We have to understand what their issues are and what their desires are and what they're talking about when they come to us. That being said, you don't have to be the most avid angler in the world, but you're certainly not something you want to be disgusted by or have no clue about.
That's our tie to the resource. And a lot of times as biologists or scientists, we can go do a survey, and the data is the data, and it tells us what it is, and it's based on, science and statistics. But having a general knowledge, like Richard and Jane said, about fishing, and maybe even fishing on occasion on yourself, it gives you that different observation and maybe that common thread to our customers, so we don't lose focus of that. So I think having an understanding of that, again, the data and the science is what all our stuff is founded in, and that's the cornerstone to our management. But having understanding of our customers or the things they're observing, it gives us that kind of common thread. Because sometimes in the science world, you can get lost in the data and not really understand how it affects our customers. The people, they're seeing different things than we are. It's the same thing we hear a lot of times, like, well, what do you mean you can't catch fish? I was there yesterday with the electrofishing unit and there's a ton of fish, but obviously they can't use electrofishing gear. And I think if I was there fishing in the times I go fishing, I go, oh, okay, I understand maybe the fishing is slow, or you're observing different things than I am. So I think it bridges that gap between the science and the social world. So I think it's important to have an understanding, and like Jane said, that be able to answer those questions. Our program, we front thousands of calls a year, and most of the calls are giving fishing advice to our customers. So I think it's important. It's probably not, like Richard said, necessary that you have to be an expert fisherman or angler, but having an understanding definitely helps. It bridges that gap, gives us a common thread to our customers.
Some great insight there just on learning the sport of fishing. I guess the next thing, and Jane had kind of touched base on this a little bit, but you know, if an individual is interested in this career, and let's say they're working towards getting that fisheries degree or getting that degree in hand, and there may even be some opportunities, you know, high school aged individuals, but do you think that it would be important to look for possibly internships or co-ops with, you know, whether it's the state level or federal or any or all of the above? Do you think an internship or a co-op can help someone to give them the education and some of the skills that they're going to need and maybe the direction?
So getting a co-op or a temporary job or a volunteer effort is probably the most important thing you can do. It's going to show you on the ground what the job's all about. It's going to get you face time with the folks who may or may not do the hiring. And it'll give you an idea of what you need to pursue in school in order to be successful in a potential career. I did 8 years worth of volunteering and temporary jobs and co-op jobs before I ever scored a real job. And because of that is how I got my in with the department. It's how I ended up in fisheries. And basically it's how I ended up where I'm at now.
I would highly recommend any opportunity. And I believe Richard hinted at this earlier with, you know, with where his career brought him. He has a solid background in wildlife, I believe birds. But doing those co-ops, those interns, you may think you want to do fisheries or you want to do elk or wolves or whatever, and you do something different. It's like, oh, this is really cool. I changed my mind. I really like fish, and you know, fish is the most important, right, guys? but I think it'll expose you to those different opportunities. So I think take advantage of any of those, and even volunteer opportunities. The one piece of advice I can give is when those opportunities arise, treat those as a job interview, and not just a process to gain experience. And I guess to elaborate a little bit of what I mean, I've seen some of the folks that come out on those, whether it's a co-op or volunteer opportunity, and they're in it, they're going to suffer right through it, and they're going to give it their wholehearted attempt. That's a person I'll remember, like, that kid was really good. We ought to look for that person in the future. Some of the folks, I think, come in and treat that as just a process to get experience and maybe do a half-hearted effort, or they're not really into it. You remember those whenever you see their name on interview, you know, or a applicant list in the future. So I would recommend when those opportunities come, really treat them seriously and treat them like a job interview, and you know, give it your full effort would be my recommendation.
Work experience, internships, things like that are really helpful. If you're interested in fisheries specifically and you're in high school, you should look into the American Fisheries Society Hutton mentor program. I think they pay a small stipend, but it gets you out in the field for, I think, a whole summer, and it gets you working on various fisheries projects. There's lots of other opportunities too. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, if you're interested in fisheries and your first internship isn't in fisheries, but it's in science or it's in management, that's good. That's a really good thing. Getting out and just working is a really positive thing, and it looks good on your resume and helps build your skill set as an individual. So, you know, I worked at a wildflower preserve as an intern in college, and I think that was a really good experience for me. For a while, I thought I would do plant work, and now I couldn't imagine doing plant work. I love fish work too much. So yeah, that getting any kind of experience, even volunteer work, is really good experience. And you got to start somewhere. So if you don't get that paid internship, don't give up. Something will come along. Just be persistent as you can. And it helps to be willing to move around a little bit if you can. If you're in college and you've got the summer off, apply for jobs all over and see what happens. It's a really competitive field. So if you can land that first job, that first internship, it'll pay off in the long run.
Thank you, guys. I guess as we kind of wind down our recording today, I'll try to maybe put you on the spot a little bit, and maybe you'll have something to share and maybe you won't. But are there any, little words of encouragement that you would give an individual that's wanting to get into this profession, or what does this job, how much does it mean to you? How important is it? Or it could be just an interesting story you want to share about something that has happened in your career.
I'll start, Storm. As far as a career, I really couldn't imagine doing anything else. It's a really cool job. There's times it's challenging. I think being in the customer service business, we have about 250,000 or so licensed buyers each year. So in essence, we have 250,000 supervisors, bosses. So it can be challenging, but that's what's fun about it. It's challenging, try to find that balance and, provide what our customers want, but also find the balance of what's sustainable for our resources and protect them to make sure they're there for future generations. But I really couldn't imagine doing anything else. Again, I grew up in New Mexico, and my family, we grew up hunting and fishing and camping. And my dad, I always joked that was his religion. My mom was a Baptist. My dad was a fisherman. So, but what I really appreciate about the job now is giving something back, serving the public, serving the resource that I grew up using, and it, being a part of that, the management and conservation of the resource. It's a really cool job. There's definitely times when it's challenging, but there's a lot of times you'd be in the middle of Conscious Lake at midnight doing nighttime lek fishing bass surveys, and it's clear skies and the stars are bright, and you just, it's one of those jobs you always say, I can't believe we get paid for this more often than not. So
Probably the biggest piece of advice that I could give would be, don't give up. Be persistent. I applied for a lot of jobs at Game and Fish before I finally got where I am. And I worked a lot of seasonal jobs before I finally got a permanent job. And it's not always easy because it's so competitive. But if it's what you really want to do, just be persistent. Don't stop. When things get hard, just charge through it. It's way more than a job to me. It's a career, and it's really rewarding. And I'm really passionate about what I do, and I'm really grateful and feel really lucky that I've gotten to where I am. So yeah, just the biggest thing I would say is don't give up in the face of an obstacle.
It's a really competitive field. You're going to have to work hard to get into it. That said, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I can't tell you how many times I've been on a boat ramp and some guy says, man, I wish I had your job. You get paid for that? Yes. And there's some days it matters, but most of the time I'd almost do it for free. I've devoted my whole career to it, and I'm going to retire from it here in the future. And to be honest, I don't know what my life's going to be like outside of it, because it's kind of all consuming. That said, I started out on a totally different line when I was young. You're going to have to figure out what you want to do with your life. I started out to study to be a preacher. I decided that wasn't for me, and found that this is the way to go. So you're going to have a lot of forks in your road ahead, and I would just make the most of whatever you have as you go along.
Thank you all for joining us today. And if you all have anything else you want to add, feel free, or I'll just kind of throw that little tidbit out before we finish our recording today. So if you all feel good, you can give me a thumbs up, or if you have anything that you want to add, feel free to jump in.
It helps to have a good sense of humor and to be able to laugh at yourself.
All righty. Well, we're going to go ahead and end today's recording, and hopefully those of you that are being able to watch this have gleaned so much information from the wealth of knowledge that we have here today. And truly, it is, consider yourself fortunate when you can go out there and find something that you're passionate about doing in life and giving it your all. And like Jane said, it's not a job, it's a profession. And kind of what Richard echoed, it really defines who you are in life. I can envision whenever I'm able to retire, it is going to be a sad day because the job has molded or made me the person that I am today.